All right, so where did we leave off last time? I think we had our login working, right? Oh, just so I don't forget, we will not have class next week because I will be in Florida on a cruise. But grad schools the grad classes are supposed to meet. So unless you guys want to meet. So I can look into getting a sub.
Who would you have sub?
I don't know, Ryan Guy might be coming back.
Right? Please tell me that's on recording.
It is.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so no class next week. I'll be on a cruise ship, but I'll be thinking about you. Okay, so let's get as much done as we can tonight, and we'll see. My current plan is to stop around 8 o'clock tonight. My head is just pounding, but we need to make some progress. So let's. Now the problem is, I just got your hopes up. So now, if I get a second wind, what happens? Is there like, do bad things happen? Because my foot speed's mediocre. I think we'll stop at 8 tonight. So let's make some progress between now and 8, and then we'll take some time off for break and then go from there. Make sense? You going back down to Florida, Deerfield?
Are you staying there for Easter too? I should.
Yeah, that's stupid. I would just stay down there and fake diarrhea. Tell your teachers, like, look, I'm not gonna, because don't we come back on Monday? Aren't we off Thursday, Friday that week?
Yeah.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, why wouldn't they just merge the two?
That's not the way it works. Way too easy. Man, maybe I'm gonna have diarrhea. I could reschedule that return flight pretty easily, I think. Like, man.
You missed more consecutive classes on that from when you had malaria, I think.
Well, yeah, but that was legitimate diarrhea.
Oh. You can induce
I'm trying to get the ball rolling. I had the enchiladas in the calf, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so let's take a look where we left off. I think we had our cool-looking login screen, right?
Yeah.
Let's go back here. This guy. All right, and so we'll say user. Was it user1 at user.com? Just user1? And then this is ABC123. All right. So we have us logging in now, and this is taking us to home.html, and I believe we have it now working all within one page, right? So if I log in as an admin, we get a different set of stuff, and if we log in as a provider, I get a different set of stuff. So we have admin at user.com. All right, so that tells us we're an admin. That's in that section of the code. And I think provider does the same thing. Okay, so what we want to focus on now is what that user experience looks like. User1 at user.com. All right, so once we're in here, we want to be able to create a request, and our request needs to be a little bit more formal than it is now, right? So we probably need to manage a profile. So our profile is going to have information about our house. I'm thinking initially we just assume every user has a single house. We can always change that later, but we have a single house, so we're going to be describing our information as it relates to our yard for mowing and information as it relates to our driveway for snow removal. Make sense? So if we think about that, let me open up our keynote here so we can add stuff to that guy. All right, so let's think about user profile. All right, so we have two different, we have a top level profile, right? So that's going to be name, phone number, email. What other stuff do we need to have? So top level. So name, email, phone. Well, certainly important, right? What else? Do we just have one phone, just like the best phone number to reach me? Version 1, we could always expand that if it makes more sense, but let's not try to oversolve. So name, email, phone, address. Is that good enough? For top level information, we're going to need to know that whether we're doing snow removal or lawn mowing. Okay, so then we need to think about snow specific and lawn specific. So snow specific, we need to know what the size of the driveway. And if you remember correctly, I think we talked about this the first day of class. So one of the way that Dominic had suggested he saw another app do is how many cars will fit in your driveway. So how do we have them? So we want to know number of cars wide and number of cars long for your driveway. Okay. Number of cars wide, number of cars long. All right, and I'm thinking we can maybe have a stepper that kind of fills up a driveway. That kind of shows how that would look as a visual. Okay, and then we need to have, so that's the size of the driveway. Then we need to think about whether sidewalks have to be done. So sidewalks, yes, no. And maybe like walkways or like by the house. Does that fall into the? That's all part of sidewalks. Okay, and then maybe just special notes, something like that. Just if there was something else they need that really isn't captured by the general interface to take care of. All right, anything else we need to think of for snow removal? Oh, so salt, yes or no? Right. Anything else? Seems to be maybe fairly reasonable. Okay. And then lawn specific. So how do we do the size of the lawn? Go hillbilly style. How many cars can fit here? Cars wide, cars long. We just use the same thing and just change the graphic to green. Except we have the cars up on cinder blocks.
Large, medium, and small size.
Is that good enough? Large, medium, small, I don't think says anything. Here, let's do estimating lawn size for mowing. See what they say here. Yeah. Let's see if this place seems to do service and pricing estimate. So nowhere in here does it allow me to.
I think that's more or less of you signing up for them to come give you an estimate.
Yeah. So how do you estimate? I think for now that might be a question we have to ask him, how he would suggest we estimate that. So, what else? So size of lawn. A couple question marks after that. Whether or not they're going to do trim. Is there like a standard name for that? I mean, I always call it a weed whacker. What's that called? Weeding? Trim? What do they call it? Yeah, but that's not that's not the professional name. I don't think. Like, huh?
That's something else.
Google.
Should know that.
Ay, 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 ay. You know you're in trouble when Urban Dictionary is the first thing that comes up. Probably should have thought out that Google search a little bit more than that. Lawn service. Let's maybe got to go back to the other place and find out what they lawn mowing service. Edging, maybe.
Sure. Call it that.
Edging's like on the driveway though.
Yeah, but you use a weed whacker to do that.
Pruning and edging. Is that a thing?
You can not call it edging, you can call it good.
All right.
Pruning is different.
We're going to say weed whacking. we don't know how to do that.
That's not phrasing, by the way.
We're good? Edging, weed whacking. That is phrasing?
Oh, it is now.
Oh. Dang it. All right. Yeah, so we should probably focus on snow this week. It seems to be. So let's start off with our top level management. So we want to allow them to put in their profile. So we have to have a kind of a toggle whether or not they're managing their profile or something else. I think last time we were doing this with iframes, correct? So when we go back into our snow removal dealie here, so maybe up top we have a thing for profile. Should it give us our profile setting on this screen? Like how do we want this to ultimately act? Should we be going from screen to screen to screen, or do we want it to basically have everything happen on this one screen? I mean, one screen seems like it'll feel like less load. But does that make sense? Almost like having tabs or something. Let's see. So maybe what we do is we have the sections, maybe the divs inside it. Maybe we have a global variable like called mode. What mode is the screen currently in? And that allows us to toggle on and off the different aspects of the current screen. Let's look back at our code here. So this is home. And in home, we have our login redirect. That's at the body level. So that handles us. Is that phrasing? Oh. Okay, yeah. So usually I just assume if there's laughter, it's at me. So it's a little. All right. So in any case, then we have our controller here for the content controller. This is the guy that's doing this. So we have our div welcome. So we're going to welcome them regardless, and we're going to give them a logout button regardless. And then we should probably let's give them another. And actually, let's go ahead and give ourselves kind of a toolbar at the top rather than a normal button. I think we should be able to do, well, let's just do it as a button right now, just to, so we don't have to spend too much time on it. ng click equals, so we're going to call this guy profile. All right, so that should take us to our profile. And now before we forget, let's go into our content controller. What do we call it? User controller? No? Oh, content controller. Here we go. All right, and we want to go ahead and to where we have our function for logout. So here's our logout function. I'm going to steal this real quick, and we're going to write one for profile. And we're not going to unauth them, and we're not going to redirect them. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a global variable here in our scope called page mode, and let's call the initial mode normal. Whatever. Let's say that's fine. So we'll leave it at page mode is normal, and then we're going to change this guy down here to page mode is equal to profile.
So with the normal, you just want to be at home.
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, do you want to call it home? I mean, because we're not leaving the page.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I was thinking. I was thinking like normal mode versus we're in profile mode for it, because we're not changing from home to a different page. We're just going to use the conditionals in Angular to show certain things on the screen based on our divs. All right, so we'll have normal by default, and then if they click that button for profile, we're going to flip the switch to put it into a different mode. All right, so that's our content controller. Go back to home, and so all of this stuff up here is going to show up regardless of what screen we're currently on. All right, and then we have a certain iframe that shows up depending on whether the role is this, or whatever, that kind of stuff. And this is our user, our provider, or our admin, and that's showing our user HTML. Which is under our user controller. Okay, so I think we want to do it this way. So back here in content controller, not content controller, in home, we're going to put these iframes inside of a div. Start with that. And this is going to be a ng if equals, and this is going to be, what did we call that guy? We called it page mode. If page mode is equal to normal, then we're doing all this stuff conditionally. Oh wait, yeah, we figured this out last time, right? Boot. All right, so this div only happens if we're in normal mode. This div, it'll be too early in the night to start making the typos, especially a repeat of last week. All right, this is profile. We'll go ahead and just do a H1 profile for right now. Okay. So hopefully we can hit that button. Well, we don't really have a toggle, so to speak, at this point. We'll be able to come in on the normal page, hit profile, and it should turn everything else off, but show us a profile header at the very least. So let's just refresh this. So there's that, and there's our profile header. And now we have no way of getting back to home, so we probably want to give ourselves a home button for right now. And we can always change the way these buttons work later to make it more aesthetically pleasing, but for right now we'll stick with the buttons calling a function. We can just have different buttons calling the same function later on. So inside of user controller, let's go ahead and give ourselves a, oh, it's not user controller, sorry, content controller. Let's go ahead and give ourselves a normal function, and we'll call that, we'll give ourselves a button here. Normal, and maybe just call that home or something. That should now allow us to toggle back and forth between those screens. So there's our profile, there's our home. All right, so far so good. All right, so now under our profile screen, we want to go ahead and we want to create a form that allows us to show our profile. So let's go ahead and build our HTML form builder. I don't want to have to create an account. Give me a, oh heck, I'll just write it. So lazy. Okay. I really don't want to have to write it. All right. All right, so we're going to have, we decided, a name, email, phone, and address. So we're going to have name, input type is equal to text. We'll link these to Angular here in a few minutes just to get the form showing up right. All right, so that's name. We want to separate first name and last name probably. There's email. There's phone. And then address is going to look a little different. See, this is where the web form builder would have helped. So give us the already went to that one. Try it free without signing up. Ah, that's what I want. Okay. Create new type form. Let's go. Ooh, template. I clicked it. Probably a registration form is going to be the closest to what we're doing. I'm tired of this. All right. I thought it was going to be so easy. All right. Well, so for right now, we'll go ahead and so we're going to have street. Well, I guess let's just put them all on separate lines for right now. So what we usually have address line 1, then city, state, zip. All right, let's leave it at that for a second and see what that guy looks like. All right. So we probably want first name, and actually we're not even going to make it look pretty right now. This is it. All right. So we need a submit button down here, and we need to go ahead and bind these guys to variables. So this is going to be similar to what we did on the what controller did we use for the create? Do we already have their email? Yeah. Then we should probably just pull it from them. Although, because do they have to have an email in order to create this? They have to verify it?
I don't know if they have to verify, but you have to enter the email to sign in.
What we can do is we can, we probably should be able to pre-fill it, and then they can change it if they want, maybe. I don't know. Let's just treat it separately right now, and then we can always link stuff together. All right, so in our user HTML, here's our model for each of these things. So we're going to steal that model, because inside of user controller we use model somewhere, right? Service requests, auth data, but no, that's not it. Submit. This is my end user controller. Well, I'm just seeing where it's connected here. Scope, no, it's role. So in HTML, the service name should map to a variable back here, and we're under user controller. Order by child equal to that. Okay, so when we click submit in the user controller, that's down here. Oh, here it is, scope name, service name. That's how it links. All right, so in home, we're going to create models for each of these guys. Ooh. Let's just blanket initially, and then we'll fill them back in. So this gives us, this is two-way binding. When we had the role on the Angular side, that exposes it through to the site. In this case, things that are happening on the site get exposed to the scope on the Angular side. All right, so this is going to be fname, lname, email, and then I think what we can do here, let's see. Let's do a little bit of a cheat. This is in content controller, right? Scope user email, so we should just be able to put user email in there. I think we should be able to do that. And that'll pre-fill it, Curcio. At least that's my belief. All right, this is going to be phone. This is going to be street. This is going to be city. This is going to be state. This is going to be zip. Still don't have a button, but let's just see what that looks like. So we gave ourselves our models so we can read these things in. And then the value of our email should get pre-filled with user email, which is a local variable in content controller right here from our auth data. So the hope is it pre-populates. Let's find out. What? It's right up here. Am I grabbing it the wrong way? Yeah, it's right here, user email. I wonder, can we not have spaces? Do we have to have spaces on either side of it? Or is it this?
Yeah, I don't think you put the braces in there when you use the quotes.
I can't imagine that's going to make a difference. Here, let's just test something here real quick to make sure I'm not being stupid. This might not actually give it an initial value. Yeah, it doesn't. HTML form input type text default value. Placeholder? No, placeholder is not going to do anything. Will be interesting to see if placeholder.
You're trying to grab it from like a scope variable, right?
Yeah, we're in the scope.
Okay.
But I mean, at this point, I'm not even grabbing the variable. I'm just trying to hard code the word blah in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't think the problem is we're not grabbing the email. I think the problem is that we don't know how to get something to pre-populate into that.
Yeah, that will throw blah in there right now.
But is it blah that is editable, or as soon as we start typing, does it disappear?
It will disappear once you start typing.
Yeah, that's not really.
Trying to think how you,
Well, value is how I thought HTML worked. I thought we would say value.
Value with just something. Okay, yeah, you did. You did value equals blah, right?
Correct. I mean, I guess an interesting thing here is we could do this. Is it called user email? Is that the name of our variable? Oops. That's in our content controller user email. So two-way binding should put the email address in there. Huh? I bound it to our user email through ng model. So rather than creating a new variable for this, I literally bound it to the email address that was already there. So then the question is, do we even, if we're going to do that, then if they change it, we're having them change. Well, no, that's not true. Because we're not changing the actual email. If we look back at, it won't. User email is just a local variable that happens to get initialized to the email associated with that user. If we decide to set it to something else, that's not the end of the world. We're not changing this user's authentication thing. At this point, they're just no longer linked. So they can either just leave it alone, which will just make their profile email address the same as their username, or if they want to change it, that's fine, but at least it's pre-filling, because that's the two-way binding of Angular. So there's a decent example of how two-way binding works. For all these other ones, every one of these guys, the model, fname, lname, phone, street, city, state, zip, we're defining the variable on the front end, on the HTML side, and then it becomes a variable on the back end of the front end, on the Angular side. Where in this case, user email was actually a predefined model on the back end, the front end of the back end, and this is the front end of the front end, the back end. Which got that, old Alex? All right, so since user email was a variable we already had a value to, when we bound this guy to it, it went ahead and auto-filled it in with that value. So I think that probably pulls off what we wanted to pull off, at least at this point in time. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and create let's store this stuff in our database initially. We'll forget about snow removal for right now. Because what should happen is when we come back in and we pull this data, we need to be able to grab this data. So these things should all be pre-filled anyways. Is that right?
So would we want it to be all pre-filled, or do we want a screen that has the profile information and then they can edit it on like a different screen?
I would say right now pre-filled.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess kind of a theme that I want us to follow right now, just so we can keep making progress, is not to oversolve. You know, let's get chunk features in there, and then once they're working, we can decide, okay, should this actually work a little differently? Now that we're starting to get a hang of the Angular stuff, it seems like we can do things fairly quickly once we have a working base. What was it talking about? Oh, that's right. So in any case, what we can do is I'm going to actually just call this, just so it matches up to our other things, I'm going to call this guy email right here. And we're going to I'm going to do this. We'll go into our content controller. So this is our user's email. So I want to go ahead and actually, I don't think we need to define it up there. As soon as they click on profile, let's get profile. So here's where we get our service requests. Let's start off with getting our profile information down here in our profile function. I'm not sure if we want to get that every single time or just once. I think we want to just get that once, actually. So we'll do it up top. All right, so we're gonna get profile info. So I'm going to go ahead and create our scope information for all of our variables for our profile, and then we'll start filling them in. First name, last name, email, phone, street, city, state, zip. Yeah.
It's going to be already set to something, so.
Their username has an email already set. Do we force them to use that, or do we let them set a separate email?
Well, I mean, if they don't, it's still going to be set to it.
Don't worry about that for right now. Just in general, what's our policy for it? Do we want to force the email address that gets used for communication to be the same email address associated with their login, or are they allowed to change their email address?
I guess I would just make them use that one simply.
Okay, fine. So then we don't even need, well, what we'll do is we'll so we're going to set email equal to that. So I don't think we use user email anywhere else, do we? Pretty sure we don't. And then what we're going to do here on home, since we're not going to let them change this, we'll show the email, but that's not a changeable field. That makes sense? So now when we go in here, their email is here, but it's a hard-coded field that they can't edit. And I suppose at a later date we could put a link in there that says change email, and that probably has something to do with updating their user account. I bet you that exists in there, but let's just leave it alone for right now. Okay. So we'll go back to our content controller. So now we need to go ahead and actually grab the information from our profile. So this is going to be profile. I assume this is going to be profile. Let's take a gander at our Firebase database before we go any farther. So we have role, we have service requests. All right, and then we need to look at how do we filter on those. All right, so profile, this is our new endpoint, and then we're going to get our profile data. So scope profile data is equal to, let's just steal everything there. And we'll modify it. So this is going to be profile dot order by child. Right now we don't have a profile field, so we need to start one, right? All right, so that's off this guy.
It'll do it automatically if you
Just say profile and then enter.
no, if we run the code once. You can't just create it and not put data into it.
All right, so it'll give us a blank one, but I can't order by.
Why are you trying to order by child?
Well, I'm not. I just copied the code from here. So I mean, we ultimately want to just get the.
So it would just be,
Because this needs to be for our profile. We do need to have a user. We need to have the profile information associated with a user ID, so we can actually leave it just like this. Order by user for user ID. Right? Which should only give us one thing. Because when we store this in there, we're going to have, I mean, there's going to be profile information from our 30 different users in the app. But when we say order by child equal to authData.uid, it's only going to give us one profile record.
oh, we're trying to query right now?
That's what this does, right?
Yeah.
This gets me my data. So we're going to grab the data from there and try to populate this, but we won't actually have any data in there
Okay.
initially. All right, so that's why I was thinking that we need to create a profile child first and then set up these fields. Well, let's just see what happens. So we'll run this once. I don't think it's going to create data. I think that's made up when you said that.
If you enter information and then have a submit button, it should.
Well, right, but I don't have a submit button. I'm trying to query from something that's not there. Actually, shouldn't have to refresh. So I think what we need to do here is we need to have a, let's do this just for the sake of argument. We're going to say fname is actually equal to profile data. That'll give us a quick way of seeing what that profile data looks like. It'll be whatever's in our first name text box. So I'm guessing that means there was nothing.
You don't have anything.
Well, right, I want to know what kind of value I got back from this guy. When I said Firebase, go ahead and get me from our profile endpoint, which I set right here. That's off our child. Here's our original, well, actually ref is on the previous screen. But off our Project Snowman, we have a new endpoint profile that I'm saying give me all the data, order by user, which we have no users. We have no data of type profile right now. But this shouldn't crash. This should give me nothing, so it's showing nothing in there. So I wonder if, how did we ask the question before? Yeah, I think it's going to be, here, we can test this real quick. We're going to say if scope data, then let's just do that right now. And we're going to say found, else not found. So we would expect this to be not found right now. It's going to try to do its query. We're going to get its data. It's going to get nothing. There's nothing in there for that user ID. There's nothing in there for any user ID. So we should see a not found after this test. Oh, beautiful. So we actually got stuff? Or it's just not null? All right, so looks like we need to do a console. Was it console right? Console.log. Like that, or lowercase? Where's it under? Is it one of these guys? Settings? Oh. I thought it was up in the top right there for some reason. And then it's console. All right, so that's our user controller. Oh, that must be it right there. The empty list. So since that gives us an array, we should be able to ask the length of that array. So that's probably this. Let's guess that it's a Java style array. Well, JavaScript style array. So this should give us a 0. Yep, 0. So that's really what we're asking for. So we're asking here if the length is greater than 0, then it's found, otherwise it's not found. All right, so now this should be back to, well, this should be not found now since we have no things in there. So we go to profile, there's our not found. Okay, so if it's not found, we'll have everything be the empty string initially. If it is found, then we want to pre-populate everything with its current stuff, right? All right, and then we need to give ourselves a nice submit button down here that actually goes and saves stuff, and we're not going to actually validate the form yet. All right, so let's steal our one of our buttons from up here. All right, and this is going to be update profile. Yeah, we'll even say update profile on the button. Looks good enough. All right. Then we need to go write that function, and it should do all those things. So we'll go into our content controller, go down here. We're going to write a function called update profile. And this guy is going to do the stuff it takes to save a that profile data. We should be able to steal that from our, so here's our service request push thing. So service request itself was an endpoint from up here, right? Or it inherited that from the previous guy. So we'll go back to home. Actually, I'm sorry, we go back to the content controller, and service requests was something we made up here, and now we have something called profile. So we're going to use profile to do this. So we're going to say profile. Actually, yeah. Dot push. We're going to have the user. We're going to have the F name, which will be service F name. We're going to have the L name. That's L name. We're going to have the let's see, we're not even going to save email because we're just relying on the, okay, so now the next one's phone, or another one is phone. Then another one is street. Street, city, state, zip. All right, so that should push it. That's when update profile gets called, and we grab all the stuff from those things. Okay. Refresh this, go to profile. Oh, we need to update our, this is in content controller. I'm going to steal all these. We'll paste it there. We'll paste it there. Except we'll get email out of both of them, because email is a hard-coded thing. All right, so if the length is greater than 0, that means we can go ahead and fill stuff in. So to fill stuff in, let's look at our user controller. Actually, just look at user here. So that should just be dot name. I think that should work. All right, so if the data was there, we can go ahead and say var object is equal to, we know if it's there, there's only going to be one of them, right? Just because of the nature of profile data. So we can say var object is equal to scope profile data at bucket 0, give us the very first one. And then here, we should be able to say f name is object dot f name. There should be L name. There should be phone. There should be street. There should be city. There should be state. And there should should be zip. Otherwise, everything is blank because this is the first time nobody's ever saved a profile, but we will hard code in the email. We don't let them change that. And then if they happen to hit the button to update their profile, then we'll go ahead and grab all the data from the two-way binding and push it. Okay, so let's see what happens when we do that. All right, so right now it's showing us nothing. I'll go ahead and say Mike Littman. Let's update that. Theory is that should now be updated. Let's refresh this. Click on profile. Row. Let's look at our database. We now have a profile with some stuff in there. Got the user part right. Nailed it. So, all right. So let's see.
Oh,
Did you screw up?
no. Go scroll up. You don't have a user. Profile data. Order by child user.
What do I have? Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay.
That's all I have. That's the only thing I have. So it had to be. All right. So when I did that, scope F name, scope L name. Oh, you know what? I think it's because the email did not get saved either. That's just setting them up as blank initially. Otherwise, I don't even need this else. I don't need to bind them on this side if they're, because they're bound, they're getting bound on the other side. So I don't need to bind them on this side. Scope email does need to get bound if I want it to be connected to that guy. But actually, I don't need it to be connected to that guy. Oh, I do, because auth data is a local variable. It's just a var somewhere on the previous scope. Oh, it didn't save those other things anyways. So if I hit update, user auth data, F name, scope F name, L name, scope L name. Let's see if that makes a difference. All right, so it's upset about something.
Is it because you don't have? Did you push up? Is it dot update? Is that what you used?
I did push. First argument contains undefined and property profile F name. Let's go look here. We have F name. Let's make sure our binding looks right on home. This is model F name, L name, phone, street, city, state, zip. And this is our user that's logged in, so it's getting that part right. User colon. So profile.push, we have user F name, L name, phone. User F name, L name, phone. Street, city, state, zip. Street, city, state, zip. And it saved all those the first time. Right, so we need to look, so does push just create the first time, it doesn't update? Maybe that's the issue here. So let's do Firebase Angular. Angular Fire. Okay. Okay, so calling push generates a new child location, so we would only push initially. So was it my own fault this broke the first time? Let's just check this. So if I come into Firebase here, and we just dump that thing that's already there, now we should be able to rerun our site. Go to our profile, there's nothing in here. We'll just say Mike, update the profile. Okay, it's still upset. What's in here now? Nothing? So it's line 64. It's this guy right here. We're saying profile, which is our new endpoint. We know that's working because we've seen it saved to that endpoint. And then we're pushing. There's something that's user pair, user. Appears to be pretty similar to what we have up here. Service requests was our ref child service requests. Profile is our ref child profile. It's all legit. So here, just for the sake of argument, let's just try to save the UID and the first name. Refresh this profile. Okay, it doesn't even like that. Profile.name. So it's yelling about this guy, that there does not exist a profile.name. We don't need to pre-create here. Create a service request. Let's try hard coding the mic. Shouldn't matter what I type there. Alright, so it's okay with that. So that means the problem is with the scope variable. Okay. Let's give these. Oh. Would have thought the binding would work automatically. But we'll go ahead and create the variables, which should then bind to the equivalence. On the screen. So we have a bunch of variables that should bind to our front end correctly. We potentially modify them if there's actual data. So now all these guys should exist. So that when we hit update profile, scope.fname should be a thing, because scope.fname was a thing up here. It's acting like it's not a thing. Okay. Well, that acted better. Here's our profile. All right, but it's not saving it. It's just acting like it's a thing. So set it to Mike there. Let's refresh. Let's go home. It's our model, fname, lname, phone. And we do that from the scope, like we did in our user controller. When we saved it by scope.serviceName, where service name came from this input box under ng model service name. So why is it not ng model fname? We have this no validate thing in there. Is like, can that really be a thing? Yeah, it is right here. It's part of the form tag. I had hard coded that mic in there. Let's get rid of this guy. There's our profile data. Here's our variables. And let's just set this to Bob. Make sure that that binding is occurring. So we should see Bob on the screen now. Okay, so it's bound there. All right, so that worked. So now if I go in and I change Bob to Mike, and I update, still Bob, still Bob. I have no idea why there's 4,000 of them in there. So when we type something in there, is this all getting called multiple times? I'm not saving email. What do you mean it's not hitting the email?
Oh, never mind.
I mean, the email is getting in there, but we're never saving it. Why are we not getting? So now we should actually get a value from there. So I would expect that we would get into our, and that guy would get set. Let's do a console log. See if we get inside of that if statement, because now we do have a record in there. Okay, profile. These are just warnings. All right, so I didn't get there. So this is before. This is, let's say here. This is after. There's our before, there's our after. Put in the profile data length. Would have expected it to be 1 in this case. Before 0. It's called profile. That's the unique index. How come these guys look different than the service request and profile does? Roll.
Because there's nothing, it's just the user ID, and then if it's a user, provider, or admin, there's nothing under that.
But should it still have a unique?
The unique thing is the user ID.
Well, the same thing's true here. We have a unique user.
ID, which is equal to that first one. So that user ID right there is equal under the role to that first one.
Oh, I understand. But role in and of itself is just like profile. So we have these 3 things like this. So if we look at profile, it's organized like this. Here's 1 record in profile.
Yes.
Looks like this. Well, how come 1 record in role looks like this?
It just has that user ID, and then whether it's a user, provider, or admin. It's just telling you the role of that user. Does that make sense? It's only 1 level deep. There's nothing.
Oh, so this one's automated 2 levels because it gives you the unique ID here, and then these are all name value pairs underneath it. So since there's only 1 value here, they use that as a top level.
Yeah.
Is there?
What we could do is we could just use our user ID as that level, so it doesn't generate a random thing. If we wanted to.
And why wouldn't we? Where do we create our role? Do we hard code these in?
Yes. But I mean, now it's easy to do. Because once they sign up, they have that user ID, and then you just authenticate them and then put their user ID in the role and say that they're automatic.
Yeah, but I bet you we'd have a problem right now rating a new record in role.
Why? Because all you have to do is role.child and then put that role.child, and that equals the user ID, right?
So is that the issue here? Is, hold on, we're doing a push here.
Yeah, which would generate the renew random ID.
And up here, we said service request push. username. So we sent all those things, and push generates the random thing, which is fine. So we can do 20 service requests here, and for each one of them, it generates this random ID here because we did a push, and then here's the information underneath it. Random ID, information underneath. We're doing the same thing with profile. We're doing a push. But we actually don't. I don't think we want to do a push.
Use the set. The set will create a new one if it's not there and update it if you have one already.
But we want to do this off of the user ID.
Well,
Otherwise,
then do service request child auth data.uid set.
and that'll give it this top level.
Sure.
But not for service requests. We'll do it for profile. So you want to say profile. So what is it? So under
Child of auth data.
this guy UID. And do I put the auth data in there?
Yes.
And then it's just dot set. And set will request it if it's not already there. So I no longer need this user thing, right? Now it's going to be all of this stuff. So this will create a child off of profile with unique identifier auth data UID and set the value of that guy to this JSON thing. And if it's already there, great. If it's not, it'll update what's there. Okay, let's see if that makes a difference. It still doesn't explain why the other one wasn't working.
No, it is.
It explains the fact that we had this weird thing. For us, we shouldn't. Service request makes sense for this because you can have a single user who makes 10 service requests. So that's where push makes sense for this because each time you push, it generates a random unique row identifier, if you will. We're up here, role is its own thing, but for profile, we should have exactly one object per user ID. Okay. But I kind of hope this doesn't fix it. It does fix it? Okay, good. Because that doesn't, I mean, there's another underlying issue. All right, so that's the good part. We get the top level, but this has to be something with our scope. Why aren't any of the variables being set? I mean, we do still say scope F name here, don't we? We don't just say F name. And it worked here. Authdata.uid scope.service name. All right, just for the sake of whatever, let's do, I'm just going to get rid of all that. Now the binding is 100% on Angular's front end. We're not possibly messing it up on the back end. That's got to be what we're doing, is we must be breaking something with how the auto binding works. Which I don't, it can't be right either. It doesn't even make sense. So it hated that. Undefined in property. F name.
Would we prefer to do this inside the user?
Well, I mean, it shouldn't make a difference. Is there something special we're doing inside of user that our user controller?
Well, the user is a different app.
Well, it's a different controller.
We use a different app in it too.
Okay. So app, user controller, here's our same Firebase, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. We get our role. Here's our submit button, service request dot push.
And I think that's where it actually does that because
It is.
inside content controller, we shouldn't use the push or
This one's not getting used.
it shouldn't be.
It's calling. This form is part of the user HTML, which is in that other app. I mean, I'm fine with doing this inside of maybe a profile.html, but that still doesn't explain why this isn't working.
Does it have to do with inside the HTML of home, where the content controller and login redirect are underneath each other? Because I think that's what we ran into an issue last time with, so that's why we ended up taking it to a different page in new app.
All right, so our app here is called home. And this is login redirect. And then we have a controller underneath that, and that's our content controller. So all this stuff is happening inside of our content controller, isn't it? So everything inside this div, which ends right here, is governed by our content controller. Which means that this profile stuff here is governed by that, and we've seen it's linked. Update profile gets called from that context. Here's update profile, which takes our profile which is whatever our reference is, which should be this top level guy. And then this part's working, authData.uid dot set just try something here. I'll do console.log here, concatenated with scope.fname. Make sure we have access to the scope there. All right. Oh, I need to probably give it a value. All right. That starts explaining something. So scope.fname does not have a value. This guy is in home. Here's first name. ng model is fname. And this should be in the scope of content controller. Oh, maybe that's it. I think you might be right. Is it for the wrong reason? Where's this index is our login page? So we come in here. That doesn't have to be, okay, let's test that. Row. Is that right? You got this. Did we just not even give this guy?
You're reading two controllers at the same time, right? Is it two different apps? Because your login redirect app,
Oh, it's circling back on the previous guy.
yeah.
Do we even need to give that guy an app? Clearly.
Your login redirect app, I think is different.
Oh, that guy must be called home.
Yeah.
So that's where that's coming from. Oh yeah, that's home, okay. So that means content controller. That's home content. Doesn't this guy, oh, but wait. Wait, no, we should be okay. I can call that one home. And now do I have access to the scope again? So content controller. Alright, so that guy works that way. Home. Gonna redirect. So then this guy could be ng app. Content. It hates every bit of that, doesn't it? So when I have it like that, content controller stands on its own related to home. And if we don't connect this guy to an app, what's the default app? My app? So it seems clear it would get fixed if we set this up the exact same way the user is set up, but it's unclear why. And it has to do with the scope of the variables. So it's happy again now. If I click profile and I go and I type something in here and I hit update profile, this whole thing should be governed by our content controller. But when I hit update profile, you figured it out? What worked? Well, just like we did for user. Right. So, I would not be surprised at all that that works. The question is why. That's the more important question to answer, because that's the part we'll learn from. Why is it that this right here should be bound to this right here? This is scope F name. And if I look at the code here in content controller, we are in content controller, which governs this div, which should govern this table, or this form rather.
What is it, getting confused with the login redirect controller? I think that's what it is.
You think it's this guy.
I think it's those two controllers are getting confused on which one it's trying to use.
So if I
Because that governs the whole thing.
if I dump that, what does login redirect do? All right, it just redirects us, and we're confident that we're logged in for the moment, so we don't actually need that for the moment. So I should be able to then take out the contents of that like that. Why is that guy still upset? So this guy, it's just a single controller. So we came from my app. So let's try this then. Over here, so the argument is that I should be able to have access to username. This is in my app in our form controller. My app, ng form controller. Here's index controller. Oh, here it is. It's called form controller. My app form controller inside of a file called index controller. In fact, I'm going to rename that. There seems to be a misunderstanding on how these controllers work. Let's refresh this real quick. Okay. So this is index controller. When we log in, the app we belong to currently is something called My App. All right, so there's the code for that, which is controlled, which references this. I should then be able to do something like this, $scope test is equal to blah. I'm just going to steal this variable there. I should then be able to come down into content controller, and down here where we're getting the, I should get a blah there. Because this guy, content controller, doesn't redefine a new app, I think from last time, wasn't our understanding that he inherits the app from his parent? So in index, this guy uses our index controller, which is housed inside of an app called My App. One question is, why do we have more than one app? What's the purpose of app? Scope test blah. So then we ultimately redirect to home.html. Home.html is here. So the body of this switches scope to a new app called Home for login redirect. So let's.
So what I just read online was every single time you use the
App.
every single time you use the ng controller, it creates a new child scope of that.
Okay, which is fine because then it should inherit the variables above it. So I'm going to test something else here. So I'm going to say scope test is equal to login redirect. I want to find out whose scope. I mean, we have somebody's scope inside of our content controller. It exists. We just need to find out whose scope it is. And the thing is, are we spitting out? We had this. We have the email. We saw the email.
Or are you just setting it again?
Well, no, we had it attached to something in our form.
Well, yeah, but every single time we're getting the auth data, aren't we?
Yeah, that's the part I'm not sure of. So let's go back to index controller here. We're going to change this guy to index controller. Let's see whose scope we actually have. Doesn't matter what I type in there. I have login redirect scope. Okay, so that answers some questions. So since I have login redirect scope, but I want my app scope, why do we have them all in different apps? Why isn't there just one app? What's the purpose of an app? I mean, the purpose of a controller makes sense. If we get a brand new subscope, but we're in login redirects scope now, I presume because of this. Oh, I wonder, can login redirect, can he choose not to create a new app? Maybe we're our own worst enemy here. We're creating an app for every screen rather than just controllers. So we'll do that. And I realize we're over a little bit, but I'd like to figure this out so we can just stop instead of take a break and come back. Let's see. 3. All right, so we're going to have login redirect just inherit the global app everybody else is in. He has his own scope related to login redirect. That's fine. Then we have our content controller. He also inherits the same app, but he has his own scope. That's fine. We need to make sure in home, I don't think so. So this controller controls the body of that, and we'll do a redirect. This controller controls this div, so it's a sub controller. So that's why it made sense why we got login redirect, because this controller creates a scope within the scope above him, which is this scope, but this guy created a new app, so he lost access to the original scopes app, the original app scope. But what doesn't make sense is, shouldn't this guy have had his own scope?
Yeah, but was it getting confused was that creating a new controller within that my app? We're trying to think that it was in that app?
Index controller. So this guy has we have one app called My App. Index. This guy doesn't even. Oh, here it is. This guy talks to My App. Great. So that gets the ball rolling. We ultimately end up at home. This guy doesn't talk to a specific app. He just lets the good times roll. Here's a login controller for login redirect who no longer is part of any special app, so he should be grandfathered in. So here's his local scope, which would then provide things to the content controller scope. So now we have 3 scopes. We have the scope from index controller, which provides its variables to its subscopes, which are both which is login redirect controller, which provides its environment to its subscope, which is content controller. So content controller should have access to login redirect and index controller as well as his own stuff. All right, so if I go into here and I take out the scope test, we should now prove that we now have access to stuff from index controller. Okay. App is not defined. In login redirect and content controller, do we just say we're all the same app? Or maybe we have to redefine it here. Back to my app there. Because that was not part of the scope. Let's just try to run that. And here's user controller. Oh, that's that user app. Man, we have a bunch of freaking apps just floating around. Angular app tag. Okay, the ng app directive designates the root element of the application as typically placed near the root element of the page, the body or HTML tags. There are a few things to keep in mind when ng app. Only one Angular JS application can be auto-bootstrapped per HTML document. The first ng app found in the document will be used to define the root element to auto-bootstrap as an application. To run multiple applications in an HTML document, we must manually bootstrap them using Angular Bootstrap instead. Angular JS applications can not be nested within each other. Okay, so that's clearly what we are doing. Do not use the directive that uses on the same element as ng. Include ng view. Right off the bat, don't we have a problem with this is content controller? Let's just specify my app here. We don't need to. No, the new one would be when we have the directive, the ng app out here in it, like an index. So we have ng app out here, although they did specify that usually this is put on one of the top level tags, like body. That shouldn't change the behavior, but effectively, my app. That takes us to home. The assumption is we're still in my app here. It says per HTML page. So do we do something like that here? to specify we're still in my app, we could put it at the HTML thing. So this, it says you have to do it once per. You could do it a maximum of once per, but do we lose connection if we don't say this guy's part of the same app? This is just upset about a So why are multiple things popping up here? Both of these controllers if I remember correctly, didn't we try to put this in the head last time and that didn't fly, right? So our content controller, which is right here, which says, hold on. He still doesn't have access to user email or the role. These are the most interesting and the most infuriating problems at the same time. Because we know exactly how we can fix it, but we don't know why we have to fix it. We can model it after a user and have it working, but that doesn't tell us why it currently doesn't work. What if we don't have any app tag? I don't think you have to.
Alright, how does it know where to look for control numbers?
Oh, I guess it,
Those app.modules will error out.
yeah, that's true.
Does that create the new app or just create the?
Let me try this. All right, so then we get here. And this is okay, so this is the, what do we call this guy? Comment out app there. going to see if we can make this guy a child of the index controller.
Why are you inside that login redirect?
Yeah, so I'm not going to give this guy an app tag like we did before, because that seemed to be maybe the problem that was confusing it.
But why is those variables outside the app? Go to the login redirect controller.js.
What do you mean?
If you open that in the JS, in the JavaScript file, the login redirect. Why are those bars outside of it?
They're global values. Are other controllers, do we put it inside? No, we usually define them before. Oh, it looks like, yeah, it looks like it doesn't matter where you put it from a correctness perspective. So having said that, these could probably go inside here since we only have one scope in here for this one controller. If you had multiple controllers in this guy and you wanted these variables to be available to all those controllers, you would do that. So login redirect is not going to be associated with his own app, so he should inherit the app for his base, which should be, in this case, at this point here, we are still bootstrapped under index app. Now we're going to create a ng app. Home app.
Won't that error out 'cause that's a nested app?
No, he's not a nest. You get one app per HTML document. This is our first app in this HTML document. So we're bootstrapping a brand new app from this point forward. And that's going to be our home app. And that is inside of, actually it's called this content app. So now when we go into content controller, we have content app here, which has all this stuff in it. Okay, so login redirect. This app is not defined. So the thing is, we want this guy to be part of index app, which should be the same as whether then it should make a difference whether this app controller was in here or in that first screen.
Did you change it to index app inside?
I did. Inside of index, yeah. So with that in mind, we could have this an index controller. We could have two different controllers in here. Index controller as well as our login redirect controller, but we split them across two files, and then so we had to give ourselves access to this this guy. I assume that this is not a different index app. It's still the original. That could cause its own problem, I suppose. Okay, auth data is not defined in content controller. Oh, because it's from right here. Because now we're in our own app. That makes sense. Okay, so there's our user. If I go to profile, I don't even run, before I even run it, let's see what it should say. So now we should say scope test. And let's actually not even do that. Let's just do scope f name. Let's go to what we think it should be. So refresh this, profile, Mike run undefined. Why is that still undefined? I am inside content app, content controller. Here, let me just for the sake of whatever. Scope.fname is equal to Bob. We should definitely, except I need to call this scope. We should definitely have an F name here. Okay, and we see it there. It bound it, and it's here. Okay. Yay, yay, yay.
Was that the same error this time though? Or was
The error, at this point, the error is kind of insignificant, I think, because it's definitely fixable. All right, I'm going to spend another 2 minutes on this, and then we're going to break the laptop in half and call it quits. All right. Okay, so if we go into home, which is governed by our content app with our content controller. Actually, with that in mind, we shouldn't even need the app. So now that we understand how that works, content controller could still be under index app where all the other guys are under. That's what this guy's under, which means we wouldn't actually need this app here. These guys are just under the hood of our global thing. And content controller would be index app, okay. So we're adding another controller to index app. There's scope F name. Let's also print out scope L name. This F name, we expect there to be an answer, but well, we lost it when we... Why is that still overwriting two things? All right. So, question, have we already looked at, I don't think we've looked at payment models yet, right? What kind of payment things? All right, so for, I'll give you a short assignment for the week. It would be awesome if one of you figures out where our brain fart is here as well. I'll give you extra credit if you can do that. I'll keep looking at it as well, but I'll put the homework assignment up. Let's do like a one-page type summary for your recommendation on what we should use for payment processing and why. I'll put a couple suggestions. Some things we should definitely look at is Stripe.com. And there's 2 other ones that I'll probably tell you to look at as well. But any other suggestion is fine. We want to make sure that it's compatible with Angular, as well as iOS and probably Android. But anything we work with should have APIs for all of those things. All right, so I'll put that assignment up, turn it in. What I'll do is I'll set the due date for the Monday before we next meet. I'm not going to look at it before then. So, okay. So basically, figure out when you have time to do it. But even though I'm not making the requirement very long, try to look into it quite a bit to have a real recommendation. And like I said, we won't meet next week, but we will meet the following Monday. So that's the 21st, I believe. Okay, so, and then, like I said, if anybody can figure out what's going on with this, in fact, just to give you a starting point for it, I'm going to go ahead and push our code. There's got to be something fundamental to how Angular works with applications and with apps and controllers that we're missing. All right, so I will see everybody on the 21st.